There's a mic on. These are the new days.
Well, we things like this, we always had a little lapel mic we used.
Yes.
I guess those days are gone, huh?
Yes, they are.
We're rolling.
Okay, this is an interview at the Bethlehem Public Library, Delmar, New York. It is the 23rd of June, 2006, approximately 2:30 p.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
My name is Bob Ruthman, R-U-T-H-M-A-N. I was born on February 12, 1921. I weigh about 195 pounds.
Where were you born?
Chicago, Illinois.
Okay, thank you. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I was graduated from Colgate University with a degree in liberal arts, and shortly thereafter, and I mean very shortly, I was drafted into the United States Army. This goes back to 1942.
Okay. Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
I think, like everybody else, I was at an initiation ceremony of our fraternity in Hamilton, New York. You want more?
What was your guess? How did you hear about it?
Well,
Was it on the radio
the initiation ceremony was, of course, a closed deal for those members of our fraternity and our new recruits. And somebody knocked on the door and said, I know it's a restricted meeting, but did you hear that Pearl Harbor was just bombed? And people were asking each other, of course, as many did, where's Pearl Harbor?
Mm-hmm. What was your reaction, or what was the reaction of those around you when you heard about this?
Pretty much wait and see, although as it turned out there wasn't much time to wait and see. We were at war, but it was a stunning event, and I think most people were caught by immense surprise, but they knew we were in for a long haul at that point.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was drafted. I was drafted, and I signed the documents in Hamilton, New York, at Colgate University.
Okay. Now you went into the U.S. Army in September of '42.
I did.
Okay. Where did you go for your basic training?
Well, that's the next topic. The first topic is how we got there.
Okay.
It was Livingston, Camp Livingston in Louisiana, and we left from Fort Sheridan, Illinois, in a train that must have been resurrected from a museum. This was the oldest train I had ever seen. It was lighted by gas lights.
Really?
The chairs were not all in sitting order. And the reason we were in such a dilapidated old train was that all the other trains were being used now for material transportation. The war was really full bore ahead now. I must say one thing. I emote sometimes. I had a stroke which just wiped out my control, not of all my emotions, but it did something that made it impossible sometimes for me to stop shedding a tear. To tell you how ridiculous it seems, I was watching a golf match on television the other day, and a guy, a golfer, I didn't even know who it was, missed a putt, and I started to cry. So, but this won't happen again.
So that's okay.
I hope. Anyway, 2,000 of us got on board this train and headed south. Now, at that time, all of the main lines were carrying very important freight and people, and we had a very low priority as just a train full of draftees. So they kept shunting us off into railroad sidings as we headed south, where we would stay for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, until the important trains went by us. Now, what this meant to the train was we ran out of food. And on the second day in the train, there wasn't anything to eat on it. The train commander was calling everywhere he could think of calling to get provisions for the 2,000 of us on this train. We were hungry. I was thinking that maybe I would be the first soldier died of starvation in his own country. But we rolled along into the second day, stopping on the way for hoping for provisions, and finally we were on a siding, and I yelled at the old man with a hoe in his garden. I said, "Where are we?" He said something like, "You're in Gloverville, Louisiana, or something like that." I said, "What's the population?" He said 39 voters, that is. So I said, "Where can we get something to eat?" He said, "That little store across the street." So 2,000 conscripts went into that little store, and we bought the store out. There wasn't anything left there. Cigarettes, candy, bread, cereal, everything. We brought it and ate it. So anyway, we kept on going down south, ended up at Camp Livingston, Louisiana, did our basic training down there, and I applied for OCS and was Officers Training Corps, and was accepted in a hurry, I think, because I had said previous military service on my application. My previous military service consisted of MTC, Military Training Corps, in high school, which didn't help me much, but it helped me get into OCS, I guess. Anyway, I went through Fort Benning, got out as a second lieutenant, went to 69th Division, Camp Shelby in Mississippi, and it was a new division, and a very good cadre of officers who wanted to make a good mark at the new division, naturally. So anyway, one of the first things I wanted to do was to check in at the officers club, which I did, and got to know the sergeant there. And I said, "How do I get some good stuff?" He said, "Well, we'll order that for you, but I got to tell you how we work it now." He said, "You know, Mississippi is a dry state." I guess it was the only dry state still left in the U.S., but it wasn't really dry. You could get booze almost anywhere. The women all carried purses that were at least a foot long or a foot and a half long to house the bottle that you brought with you when you went out in Mississippi to a club or a restaurant or wherever you went. You ordered the setups and you poured your whiskey or vodka, whatever it was, from the women's purses. Of course, that changed eventually, but that was Mississippi when I got there. Anyway, I started in as a instructor, basic training. I can remember one day when I was lecturing about field sanitation or small arms care or something, and my audience on the hillside just began to leave. And I thought, gee, you know, I'm losing the touch here. They're not paying attention. What had happened was that a coral snake had wandered down into the boys who were listening to what I was saying. unbeknownst to me, and then of course we looked and saw it. It wasn't a false coral, it was a real thing. And of course they're highly venomous, so that was why my audience was leaving me. Let's see, another anecdote of that time was that my friend Lenny had a car, and then we found a couple of nice southern girls, and we decided to have a picnic one evening, and we drove around. It was getting dark, and we looked for a nice place where we could have our picnic with the girls, and we found it. And all of a sudden, through the darkness or the twilight, headlights were coming to where we were in this little clearing. And I thought, geez, you know, I thought we were really nowhere that we would be found. So they were the MPs, military police, and they wanted to know what we were doing. I said, well, we were just having a picnic with these young ladies. And he said, who are you from? I said, I Company 272nd. He said, who's the company commander?
That's okay.
And I said, I am. He said, Lieutenant, do you know where you are? I said, no, I got a vague idea. He said, you're on the firing range. 100 yards back are the targets. So of course we got out of there. Now, what really ended and began my service career over a couple of years was my eyesight. I was right on the border of being okay as an officer, and of course I would have been okay as an enlisted man with my visual acuity, but they wouldn't decommission an officer and put him back in the enlisted ranks. So I was sort of, became sort of a football kicked around by the Army, from back to training to the hospital for administrative checkup and more eyesight exams. And went before a review board and said, well, what do you want to do? And they had my record, such as it was after a year and a half or so. And it looked pretty good. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, that's up to you. So they sent me back to duty. So I bounced around some more and ended up at the Jackson Hospital as an administrative patient. And that wasn't a bad time at all, because the food was pretty good. I came out of the field weighing about 140 pounds, and I started to pack on about a pound or two a day with the kind of grub that they were feeding us there, because it was a hospital for ambulatory casualties from the Far East. So we were, and of course, there I was with these combat veterans, feeling a little bit like a fraud, but nevertheless enjoying the good meals, and especially the Sunday breakfast when the gray ladies would come by with their carts full of apples and fruit and newspapers and magazines and everything. And of course I looked just like everybody else, like a veteran from the Far East, and I was a complete fraud as far as that was concerned, but I got an awful lot of sympathy from these nice ladies in Jackson, Mississippi. Just a word about Jackson, Mississippi. It's one of the best towns I've ever been in, except their jail. I didn't care for their jail very much. I'll get into that in a second. But they were very solicitous of our welfare, both in the hospital and outside. All my years in the South, and I covered Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Georgia. The people were very nice to the GIs in those days.
You didn't find any prejudice against you being a Northerner?
No, none at all. But, no, but black and white. There was a definite line between black and white that I encountered. not everywhere, not always, but it was there, and it was deep when it was there. But at the Jackson Hospital, next to me was a guy by the name of Lieutenant General Karl von Buhlweiss. He had been captured in North Africa, and they sent him, they flew him into the West Coast for some reason, and then down the West Coast, California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, and he landed in Louisiana, and he said, "My Gott, ich will einiges starten, it's gross." So he couldn't believe flying all this time. He was still in America. If he'd been in an airplane in Europe, he'd have been over 10 countries by this time. Now, Buhlweiss was a nice guy. He's German lieutenant general, career officer, captured in North Africa, and his orderly and translator was a black GI sergeant who spoke fluent German. So he translated everything the general had to say, and he took us through North Africa in his campaign. And the thing I remember about him was that when they got ready to strike into Egypt, he had received papers. He knew his hotel room at the Hotel Continental or whatever it was. He knew his room number, he knew his telephone number, and he knew the telephone number and rooms of his entire staff. I wish I'd stop doing that. I don't know why I'm doing that. So anyway, it was kind of odd that the German blonde, blue-eyed superior race was needed the services of a black American to make himself understood. But anyway, a couple of months later in a newspaper, I noticed a little one-column ad that General Karl von Buhlweiss, German Army, had committed suicide. So everything was over for him, and naturally, there's nothing to look forward to. Now, I had a friend at the time who was a former semi-pro football player. He was about 6'4", weighed about 250. We were walking down in Jackson one day, and not far from the bus depot, and a black sergeant came up to us and said he needed help. Well, he was he was a bloody mess. They really worked him over.
Do you want some water?
That might be a good idea. Anyway, he really was bloody. And so we went to the dispatcher's office at the bus terminal and said, what's going on here? And they said, well, he refused to get out of the white section. Now here's a white U.S. sergeant, and they were working him over because he wouldn't get out of the wrong section. He said he was in the first seat of the last seat of the black section. It wasn't the first seat of the white section. Anyway, while we were talking there, a couple, maybe 3 civilian police came in. One of them had sidearms, and he looked at me with his hand on his sidearms, and he said, I have a brother in the service. He said if he'd gone to be taken a nigger's side, he said I would have been tempted to shoot him. So this is how deep their feelings went.
Now, was he being beat up by local people?
He was beat up by the local police who had charge of making sure that the seating in the buses were segregated according to their law, which was white only and black only. And he said he was in the right section but the wrong seat. So anyway, we got hustled off to jail. And of all the things that I liked about Jackson, Mississippi, a great town, I really think their jail could have used some beautification. Well, anyway, we finally got us out of jail and brought us back to the CO of the hospital, who was full colonel, and I'm standing there in the morning in my in my pajamas. I always felt silly saluting in my pajamas, but anyway, it was early in the morning, and the colonel said, "Now what the hell are you doing there, getting involved in this business of and getting me in trouble?" He said, "Now I'm from Kentucky." It's the full colonel. He said, "I don't have a penchant for telling other people how they should run their lives." He said, "Now you shouldn't be down here telling these people how you want to run their lives. They may be not doing it the way you think it ought to be done." But keep your nose out of their business. And I said, I don't know why I'm doing this, really.
That's okay, don't worry about it.
Just breathe.
Yeah, don't worry
So
about it.
anyway, the colonel was adamant. He said, "Keep your nose out of their business." And I explained that I went to the aid of a GI who was beaten up. He said, "Remember what I said?" He said, "I don't want any more trouble from you telling other people how they should conduct their affairs." Is that understood? So that was that. So we got out of jail. I went home on leave and got back a day late because there was well, it was my fault for taking the last plane I could get out of Chicago back to wherever I was, I guess, Mississippi, Jackson, yeah. And I got a rather stinging letter from the base commander reprimanding me for being AWOL for 24 hours, and that a suitable punishment would follow. Well, I really didn't like the tone of that letter. And so I wrote a letter back. I said, "I've been kicked around long enough as an administrative case." I said, "I'm a trained infantry officer. Why don't we go to war?" So I felt pretty good about sending that letter. But in due time, another letter came back from General Ulio, U-L-I-O, from Washington, giving me a date of discharge from the service of the United States. So I was out. I went to Columbia on the GI Bill of Rights, Columbia University, and took a master's degree, and still feeling a little bit like I didn't know what to do. So I went back to Europe. The war was over, and I sent an application at the suggestion of a friend I met over there to OMGS, the Office of Military Government, OMGUS, and their purpose in life was to democratize Germany, and they had men's divisions with leaders and youth people, experts, and all up and down. We talked with leaders in Germany about how a democratic organization should run. And I don't know now, after going through those leadership meetings with the German, my part was youth work, YMCA, the Pfadfinder group, the trail people, and I don't know how much our work really has paid off. I never went back to find out, and I'm not sure I could have found out, but I think maybe it did. But, so, the one thing I remember about that time, the Berlin airlift was going on, and I was a civilian at this point, a foreign service officer with a rank of 6. I can remember going from my quarters to the office, having to wait at a stoplight. And the stoplight was a regular stoplight. It didn't last any longer than a regular stoplight of red, green, and yellow. But you had to wait for the planes to cross, the cargo planes that went by. And they went by every 2 or 3 minutes, one after the other, bing, bing, bing. They were provisioning Berlin at this time, and boy, we did a heck of a job with that. But you had to wait at the red light or you'd be hit by a cargo plane.
No, they were crossing the road?
Well, we were crossing their highway,
Okay.
their runway,
Okay.
to get to where we wanted to go. And they were going every 2 or 3 minutes. I mean, it was great. So, anyway, I met a nice young lady over there, and I got married, and she was classified as an enemy alien because we were still fighting the Germans, and she was one of those. So you can't work for the United States if you were married to an enemy alien. So that was the end of my association with Germans and the democratization program. But while I was there, I enjoyed the work. I had my own house, a requisition house on the Lahn River over there with a full staff of secretary and an aide and a cook. Couldn't ask for anything better than I had over there. Felt like a king.
Now, how long were you there in that capacity?
In military government?
Yes.
About 1.5 years, 2 years. Okay. And then when I got married, I had to leave. It was required. So home, we came back here, and we're talking about things that happened 60 and 70 years ago. And I don't know why I can't control this.
That's okay. There's
Winnie,
nothing to worry about.
damn.
Nothing to worry about with that.
So anyway, you wanted any questions you want to ask?
Well, you did make use of the GI Bill, you said. That was one of the questions I usually ask. Did you join any veterans organizations ever?
I did when I was in Paris for a while. The only place that offered hot water was the American Legion.
Oh.
So if you wanted to take a shower in Paris, you either was a Legion member or not. So I joined the American Legion post number 1. And I guess I'm still a member, but it did allow me to take a hot shower every week. But I have not been really active in the Legion since then.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you at all, or?
No, but I did meet a couple of guys who came back. We lost some guys that I was with. A lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, some never did come back, but met one in an airport in Minneapolis, and I'd known very well. And another one, I guess, down in Evanston. But exchanging letters or phone calls, no. Mm-hmm. And I think about it now. Maybe it's because the association that we had, which was sort of phony to begin with. We didn't join up. We were conscripted.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that had something to do with the lack of brotherly love or something. But I know that the guys that I soldiered with had a rough time over there. And, you know, while I volunteered to go, but looking back, I guess I wouldn't be here today if they'd have sent me over, because the infantry commander of a rifle company didn't last long.
Did you ever get an opportunity to see any USO shows at all while you were in the service?
No, things went too fast. I never did. I was always doing something, even if it was lounging around a hospital. There should have been USO shows in that Jackson hospital, but I never heard of one. I would have gone because I was there. But I also got to tell you that I had a hotel suite in town with 3 other guys. These were ambulatory wounded guys from the Far East. We all threw in $100, and for $400 we got a nice suite of rooms in the Heidelberg Hotel downtown. So we didn't have to come home. We had complete freedom down there. Didn't have to sign out for the hospital. We just weren't there. We'd sleep at the hotel. But of course, on Sunday morning when they were putting on the big shindig in the way of food, we were always there. And the gray ladies coming around with their goodies in their carts. So those are just a few of the thoughts that I put down here that I remember. And it was quite a run. And it seems like 700 years ago, and it was only 70.
How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
Well, I never essayed it in those terms, but I think the skills that you pick up in the field on problems and maneuvers help if you're going to do much camping, but I really didn't do much camping after I got out of the service, so I can't say. But I was impressed with the organization of the Army. It was good. And I was impressed with the way America had turned out the equipment that they did in such a hurry.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. Okay. Do you think you had your bachelor's degree? Do you think you would have been able to get a master's degree if you didn't have the GI Bill?
It was such a gift, I couldn't turn it down. I think the answer to that is probably not. But there it was. So I went to Columbia, got a master's degree. I enrolled at the University of Paris and was accepted there because they would like to get Uncle Sam's money. I went to the University of Oxford for a while. I mean, I was an academic nomad, really. And Uncle Sam paid for it. Here's what they got. I don't know whether they got their money's worth or not. Probably not.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much for your interview.
Well, thank you.
See, you went almost 35 minutes.
Yeah, over a half hour.
See that?
Yeah.